Okay, we're going to be calling the meeting back to order. Mr. Clerk, if you could please read in Resolution 140-13.
Resolution 140-13, Draft 3, accept a grant of easements from Kohala LLC for public access purposes. The easements will provide vehicular public access parking, and a Malkamakai and lateral walkable trail to the shoreline. Draft 3 replaces Exhibit 1 with the grant of public access easements provided in Communication 343.34. Reference Communication 343.39, introduced by Ms. Poindexter, approved FC 132.
Ms. Poindexter, a motion?
Move to approve resolution 140-13.
Second. Seconded by Mr. Kern. Okay. Ms. Poindexter, you introduce it. Would you like the floor first?
I think I'll, I'll defer to Ms. Willie since this is in her district.
Okay. Ms. Willie, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you very much. There are really two issues going on, and one has to do with the status of the Alalo Trail, and the other has to do with the grant of easement. As of the last meeting that we had, we were just dealing with the terms of the grant of easement. There was mention there would be continuing good faith negotiations going on, but that wasn't really part of what we were here and doing. As part of the discussion on the grant of easement, what I asked is, despite all the things that I felt were otherwise wrong, that if the developer was willing to put in something in the CC&Rs or in the deed or however, and there was assurance that somehow that would be fixed, that the trail, Alalo Trail, would not be blocked. In other words, we're leaving it for another day, but we would know that some third party wouldn't come in, that it would not be blocked, and that it be identified on a plan. And basically my concern was third parties coming in, purchasing a lot, and then landing on top of it. So as of 2 days ago, I felt we had language, there was language submitted to me, we went back and forth, that was, I felt solid. I'm here, I'm going to vote for this, deal with the planning department and everything I think that went wrong another day. And that I think the one thing we had left is how do we sort of, with the planning department, or make sure that this is firm and not something that, say, new owners could come in and change. So, but as of yesterday, things started going on with their dealings with the negotiating with the Park Service. And so now some of what I went is sort of been moved into that other context. And I do have a problem with this. Let me say right now, if we were going just the grant of easement, I don't even care that we even discussed those negotiations today. The public hasn't had a chance to deal with them. And just what are the terms of the grant of easement? And it includes the things that we discussed at the last meeting that I said that I would expect and that I would grant. Now, let me just say what's going on with the park may be even better and great and a bigger picture and all of that. But again, it's like I'm getting telephone calls at 10:30 at night and dealing the night before, and the public's here testifying on something that is not what's really going on right now. So I just giving you sort of 2 days, I have my email. Flint says, okay, we're good. There was no mention of the discussions of the negotiations, but now it's all getting mixed into a package. And so I will call, I would like to call Steve up or Charlie. And while they're coming up, I just want to commend you, and Charlie in particular, and all of you working through yesterday and all the work you've been doing. And I don't want anything I'm saying about this. I'm trying to think of procedure and us as a council and the role of the public and knowing what's really going on and having the opportunity to speak and sort of shifting gears from here we are, grant of easement, okay, Margaret, you're good, okay, I say okay, and then the next day it's sort of in a new soup. And not trying to be negative, but how we're sort of switching tracks, and now you're saying, no, I can't do it really in the part of the grant of easement, we need to do it this way now. And then I look at my constituents, like, what's going on? And they're calling me and blah, blah, blah. And so that's the context. I want to appreciate what you're doing in the big picture with the National Park Service. And just looking at it, partly we're at the 11th hour, we sort of had an arrangement, and now it's shifted. And how do I respond to that? So.
I think it is a very complicated subject, and that's why we've been here, I think now 9 months before the council, trying to get the grant of public access easement approved. And we do have a public access plan that's been approved by the county. We have the grant of public access easement signed by the planning director, the mayor, and it's sitting before you today. And the last time we met with the council 2 weeks ago, there was a vote, I think 8-1, that you would recognize that the grant of public access easement for the subdivision project is separate and apart from the Kohala Trail. And in fact, both for the community's benefit and for the developer's benefit.
Can I just step you though, just in terms of what we agreed to last time? I just want to move from just the terms that we agreed to at the last council meeting. And that we get the language and that we identify it. And that when we voted, it was, in my feeling, it was pressed that was going to be accomplished, and that we are changing that now. You know, we are.
No, we're not, and that's why I'm trying to make the explanation, is that the grant of public access easement relates to the subdivision and SMA requirements. The trail's been built, it's already there. We just want to have that accepted. That will let us move on with our marketing project. Voluntarily agreeing to work with the National Park Service, as you've been talking about this past week, that doesn't change that at all. This is the voluntary negotiations between Kohala and the National Park Service. We think are in a good place. I think we've got tentative agreement to all the terms, and it's just going to be a relatively long and complicated process to work all the details out, because the National Park Service does have their specific requirements as to how that has to happen. So those are intended to, and I think will address a lot of the public's concern about the Alaloa and public access and visitation to historic and cultural sites, those types of issues. That we've already agreed with National Park Service to meet again next week, and then to go out to the community and discuss that good faith agreement. So they will be directly involved in all of those things. But that is a voluntary action, separate and apart from the subdivision and the grant of public access.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. And my point is, here the language, and I can read it if a member wants me to read it, but they.
Okay, you've got about 30 seconds.
Okay, so let me wait, and Brenda, I'll let you do it during your time. Is that setting aside the National Park Service and that, it was that we pinned down this language as part of our approval of the grant of easement. There wasn't even any discussion that we were going to come in here and discuss the negotiations with the Alaloa Trail. So I'll yield from now, but that's the point. It was approving this separate, and that we pin this down. As I said, I will support you, but if we pin this down, and this is a done deal in terms of that context, even if you refuse from then on to
Ms. Willie,
negotiate.
okay, we can, okay. So, just some procedures, okay. Mr. Lim and
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Anderson, please identify yourselves for the record so the record's clear.
I'm Steve Lynn from Carl Smith, representing Kohala LLC, the applicant.
Charlie Anderson from Kohala.
Okay, thank you. And then, so Ms. Poindexter's next, followed by Mr. Kern. Ms. Poindexter, you have the floor.
Okay, like, I think what Councilmember Willie said at the beginning, viewing it as two separate issues. I still view it as two separate issues. I see the public's misperception of it being a joint issue. The one that is before us, I see, is the granting of a county public access easement. And that has been accepted, like you said, by the planning department, and the mayor signed off on it already. The second issue that is not before us at this point is with the National Park Service in the Alaloa. And so listening to the testimony, that the people brought forward, they have valid points on that issue that is not before us today. So for me, like some of the testimony, people who testified, the Capelliala family, I mean, they're friends of mine. I understand their rights to their Alaloa. But I don't want to go into talking about that issue because it may come before this council in the future. So I don't want to speak on the Alaloa in case I may be in violation of a sunshine law at sometime in the future. So I won't speak about the Alaloa. I know I see it as two separate issues. And again, it's before us to say that will the county accept the grant of easement for this? And if they don't, then the public doesn't have it. But did you cross all the T's and dot your I's as you were asked to do? And when I looked at everything and the hearings before, I see that you did. So, I cannot have my hands tied on the Alaloa that is not even before us. And I cannot even speak to some of the things that I want to say to the people of that area of how I feel. Because again, it might come up at a later date, and I want to be able to speak freely then about it, and not be in I want to be in compliance with the sunshine law. So, I'll yield at this time, and I'd like to hear from my other fellow council members.
Mr. Lee, do you want to respond in any way?
We agree with the assessment that it's a separate issue, effectively what's happening is because we're going into this my recollection of what happened at the last council meeting was that we agreed to go forward with Resolution 140-13, draft number 3, as it sits today, and that we voluntarily agreed to work with the community to try to work on the Alaloa issue separately. And so this National Park Service good faith agreement that we've been talking about is part of that voluntary effort. And it's very ironic to us that now we're into this voluntary effort to try to address the community issues that is now kind of creeping back into the grant of public access easement. So we'd ask the council to keep those as two separate issues. Let us finish this grant of public access easement up once and for all, and let's move forward with the National Park Service and the community on how we handle the portions of the property that are burdened by the old Jeep Trail.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Poindexter, you're good? Okay. Mr. Kern.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think it's a bit frustrating to see all the confusion around this. I think it's frustrating for everybody, and probably really frustrating for members of the public too, just across the board. I think it's what we've been saying for a while now, and what being said this morning is that these are two separate issues. We're here to look at a grant of easement for the county on this project that I think we did work with the developer to get something better. We got the 20 feet down, which I think is a lot better. And by no means, I just want to make sure this is really clear. The vote and the decision on this easement, it has no disrespect in any way whatsoever to any Native Hawaiians, any other practices, any other gathering rights whatsoever. I don't think we as a body have anything to say about that. It's not our position to say. So I think that needs to be made so clear, and what we're dealing with today is a grant of public easement for this. That's going to make an improvement there, and we need to keep the two issues separate. And I commend you guys for moving forward on a good faith effort to do that. I have a lot to say about that trail, and I do think it should be there in perpetuity and for people to use forever, as it should have always been. And it's probably frustrating you folks too that there's so much confusion around that. So if that can be done, I think it'll be a win-win situation. But right now, before us, we have a grant of public easement that is here that came through the finance department as well. We're not. It's tricky because it's a planning issue, but it's not a planning issue at the same time that we're dealing with here at the council. So two separate issues, and by no means is my vote today any disrespect to the Native Hawaiians at all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kern. We're going to check in with Kona. Mr. Kanuha or Ms. Iop, would you like to say anything?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, well, first, I really want to thank all the testifiers that have come out today and also previously. And just, this is just a little bit of a personal comment, is that since about the late 80s, you probably know I worked on the Pash case and the Kapa'akai case, and also the introduction of cultural impact statement law, which was seen as a means to protect traditional and customary practices and access rights of Native Hawaiians. It also protects our public trust resources. So that as development occurs, we would consider and respect these rights and practices, and by doing so, we will also protect the general public and our public trust resources, such as the Alakakai or the Alaloa Trail, which is an historic treasure unique to Hawaii. I know what everybody's saying about two separate issues, and I also agree that you could look at it that way, but at this point in time, I think they're joined. I think we're looking at a different public access plan. I haven't had a chance to see this good faith agreement, although the agreement that I'm hearing about between the Alakakai and Kohala Kai is a big step in, I believe, the right direction. I'm really grateful that we've gotten this far. I want to extend also mahalo to Eric Arakaki and Alakakai, as well as Charlie Anderson and the Kohala Kai developers. I think this is difficult, and oftentimes there's competing interests, here in Hawaii. And I think I've learned over the years that if you can settle it out of court, that's fantastic. If we can respect everybody's rights, that's what we're trying to do. Negotiating a good faith agreement is definitely, to me, it's so helpful that it's exactly what we need to do, I believe, and it's offering us an opportunity to find a win-win solution here, and also address the interests of all parties. So I actually do think it addresses or it affects the granted easement that I'm looking at today. I think it changes the public access plan. I want to support the effort, but I'm a little bit hesitant just because of having not seen what the agreement says and knowing that it's to me related. And I don't know, we've taken this long, as you said, it's been 9 months. I don't know whether it's really a big deal if we could hold it off with one more postponement, at least so the community can be involved in this discussion and this change of plans. I mean, having to vote today, I think it still causes the public some angst, and some of us too that haven't seen what it actually will do or how assured we are that the Alakakai will become a public access easement. I don't know. I want to support it, and I understand that they're separate in certain ways, but I also think that if we could take a little bit more time to bring, Ms. Willie, the planning department, the community, Native Hawaiians, everybody who has spoken out today into maybe one more effort. I think the efforts have so far proven successful. The postponements have led to this great step forward. So that's, I'm not asking to postpone at this time, but I'd like to hear from the other council members and see if that is something we could consider or would consider as we're going forward, because there's been a lot of progress. So mahalo to everybody.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ialfa. Mr. Kohala.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to issue the same as what Ms. Eoff has stated. I do want to try to keep it separate, but I'm trying to figure out, as we're going through this, if the terms of the grant of public access easement is, in relation, will be, is separate or equal to in this resolution to the Alaloa Trail. So I'm kind of at a loss of what I need to do, and maybe I need to ask Corporation Counsel. I know we've asked it 1,000 times before in the past meetings over the past 9 months, but I need like a guarantee, or is the terms of the grant of public access easement within this separate from the Alaloa Trail? I don't know if that's something that Corporation Counsel can ask, or if this thing goes through, whether a lawsuit, and a judge has to adjudicate this, whether that's going to be something that needs to be addressed in a court case. So I see, who is that? Is that Bill?
Yes, he's trying not to.
That's Mr. Brahante on his way up. We're waiting for your call, Mr. Kohala.
Thank you. Maybe I can ask Bill real fast. I need some clarification again, maybe to myself and to the rest of the community, to the public. You know, is the terms of the grant of public access easement separate from the Alaloa Trail issue?
Good morning, William Brahante, Deputy Corporation Counsel. I didn't see the chairs. I was very surprised with how quickly these chairs became vacant when I saw the motion. Anyway, Mr. Kanua, Councilman Kanua, in response to your question, you know, I too have just been in receipt of a copy of this good faith agreement regarding the developer and Kohala Kai and the United States of America National Park Service. And you know what, the position that we have, that I have constantly held from the onset of this, or from the inception of this grant of easement, has been that the grant of easement is made pursuant to a condition codified in a subdivision application that was passed in, well, first was the SMA in the late 90s, and then the subsequent SMA in 2006. And that is what we're here to discuss today, and that is the issue on the table, is whether or not, pursuant to the SMA, more recently in 2006, requirement 14 of that SMA, is whether or not the developer has satisfied condition 14, requiring the public access for the 3 parking stalls, as well as the lateral and, well, Makai and lateral, you know, access. Again, back in 2006, the opportunity or the issue of public access was specific to the parking, the Makai lateral access, and Makai access and the lateral access. There was no condition requiring an easement regarding whether or not the Alaloa Trail is there or isn't. I too, like Councilman Kern, is very receptive and very sympathetic, and maybe even to the point where really desirous of the recognition at some point of the Alaloa Trail. To me, I think that that's a tremendous historical value, and it's also a benefit and a resource that can move forward, you know, for my kids as well as everybody else's. And I tremendously respect the personal sympathy regarding from the Hawaiian community regarding the sacredness and the resources attached to the Alaloa. But that's not what we're here to discuss today. And if that matter were to come forward, I can almost assure you without any reservation that this administration and the Office of Corporation Counsel would be in support of that issue moving forward, and that issue being the designation of the Alaloa Trail or the recognition of it. And I think, like I said, it'd be tremendous if we could accomplish that. But that's not what we're here for today. And you know, I hearken and take us back to, again, condition 14, and that's really what that should be the extent of our consideration. Now, again, this good faith agreement, there was discussion, you know, at the previous committee meetings regarding this issue, and there was some requests by council members to the developer that even if the easement, this particular easement, were to be accepted by the county, that the developer would continue to work with the community, continue to work with the national park for the recognition of the Alaloa. And I think, again, I just am in receipt of this good faith agreement. I think that's what's kind of taking place right now, but we can't make that agreement or the conditions of that agreement part and parcel to the acceptance of the public access. I think, the discussion regarding keeping them two separate is appropriate, two separate issues is appropriate. And my recommendation, my opinion is that's how we should proceed and move forward with this.
Okay, Mr. Kohala?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Brojante, for some explanation about that. I know you said that 1,000 times already. I want to be clear when we move forward with this, that we're not going to be in violation of any, state laws or the state constitution when we deal with public access and traditional and customary rights. So I just want to make sure that, for me, I haven't seen the good faith agreement as well. It almost behooves us to, I know we want to keep it separate, but I would like to see that good faith agreement, and maybe if it's possible, before we move on with this, that all of us could see that as well, even though I've heard from several council members and corporation council that this is separate, the Alaloa Trail is separate from this granted access easement, but I'm not saying I'm uncomfortable with moving on here. I feel that it might be necessary for me to just I want to get the whole big picture here and what's going on in this place, because this place isn't separate. It's all equal. It's all part of the same parcel. So yes, in the terms of this document, this resolution, it might be separate, but the land isn't separate. So that's where I'm trying to distinguish and move forward from here. That's just my opinion. But I want to hear from the second round of council members and those who haven't spoken yet. I would also like to say, again, mahalo Charlie and Steve for working with the national parks in addressing this issue that the community is having. So with that, I really appreciate that. And I do hope we can move forward with this, because I do think that this could be setting some precedent for a lot of developments that happen in the future. So again, mahalo for that, and I'll yield at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kuno. We're still in our first round. Ms. Ford is next.
Thank you, Mr. Brahante, please come forward. While he is coming forward, I would like to ask Margaret, who negotiated some type of an agreement that none of us know about. It hasn't been read into the record yet, and it's been kind of turned over. And so I would like to hear what that language is. And I'd like to remind the timer that it's not on my time.
And this was totally separate. We were only dealing with the grant of easement. I had no idea that they were working on and moving forward on the, with the National Park Service. So my request was that we address the public access, but that we do assurances to ensure that the trail would not, the Alaloa Trail would not be blocked, leaving it for another day. To me, that was part of the grant of easement, and I asked for certain language to be put in the CC&Rs and on something shown on the plan showing the historic preservation site ID number. They were to get the correct one and sort of pin that down. So the language that, and this is just agreed upon in terms of grant of easement, was and this is, I can get a copy, and this is just Steve's.
Just read the language, please.
So Steve's comes from Steve Lim to Margaret CC's, and this is Steve. Okay, we have added language that clearly prohibits blockage of the trail. Proposed amendment to CC&Rs for Kohala Kai subdivision, TMK blah blah blah, 001 through and including 008. And it would be number 3. Development restrictions within all lots relating to buffers from historic alignment of the Mahukona Kauai Beach Trail, 5 feet wide, in parentheses, also known as the Alaloa Trail or Jeep Trail. All lots within the project are traversed in a north-south direction by the historic alignment of the Mahukona Kauai Beach Trail, in parentheses, 5 feet wide, also known as the Alaloa Trail or Jeep Trail, the Alaloa Trail in quotation marks. The Alaloa Trail has been designated by the State Historic Preservation Division as a historic preservation site identified as site 29271. And, this is the language we've been down, and no structures, landscaping elements, fences, rock walls, or other structures may be constructed or maintained within or blocking the Aoloa Trail alignment. In order to provide protective buffers for site 29271, and with the exception of any landscaping elements, no, this isn't, fences or rock walls, all structures constructed within any lot shall be set back a minimum of 10 feet from the Mauka edge of the Aoloa Trail.
Thank you. Mr.
So it was just preventing anything. So if that's now being moved into
Okay.
the,
Okay,
anyway.
hold on. Ms. Ford, go ahead.
I have questions for Ms. Willie. Ms. Willie, forgive my ignorance of this, I'm sure you know your district much better than I do, but sometimes you refer, that document, that letter, email, sometimes refers to the beach trail, and then other times it's referring to the Aoloa, the Mauka Trail. And while I'm trying not to talk about the Aoloa specifically, there's confusion to me in that document. So is it always the Mahukona? Is that always the Mauka Trail, or what they sometimes call as the Jeep Trail?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know why the beach trail came into that particular thing, but I appreciate your comment. I'd like to ask Mr. Brilhanti some questions. Mr. Brilhanti, I've received some documents in the last week that indicate that the beach trail, the easement that we're talking about, was also part of the Highways Act. The Native Hawaiians have been using that beach trail for, 1,000 years, or whatever you want to pick a number, whatever it might be. And that I don't quite understand why the beach trail requires an easement, because it's always been there and it belongs to the state or the county, depending on which one of us is going to take jurisdiction. And I guess you'd call it the lateral, the uphill downhill, Makamakai connector, I don't know about that, if that's always been there. So do you have information that the Shoreline Trail is an historic trail and has always been there? Then why do we need an easement on that portion of this granted easement?
Councilmember Ford, I appreciate the question. Unfortunately, I'm not in receipt of any of that information. I'd be happy to take a look at it, and I could maybe provide you an opinion once I'm able to review the document.
Okay.
But like I said, I'm not familiar with that document or that designation
Okay.
of the beach trail.
So in some of the material that we originally received, it had some old maps on it, copies of old maps on it, and that trail existed on those old maps. And so that's of concern to me. Again, I can't speak for the Makamakai connector. I will speak about, however, let me go on, just stay there please, and talk about something that I'm very unhappy about, many things I'm unhappy about. The 3-car parking lot is disturbing to me. When I came onto the council, one of my #1 priorities was public safety. And that has been something that has gone on and on through my term of office. And to put a parking lot in location X that is, I don't know, 100 or 300 feet from the trailhead, that Makamakai Trail I'm referring to, and force people to walk on the shoulder of a highway has given me great grief. Does this council have the right to change that? I know that the planning department, the previous director, please understand I'm not challenging the current director in this, because I think this took place in a previous director. Is that correct? Yes. The planning director, the current planning director is nodding yes. So I'm not happy with this. This is a very unsafe location, and there's too few stalls. So my question to you is, can this council, do we have the right to make a change in that, in this document?
Again, thanks for the question. I appreciate being on the hot seat here. But anyway, in response to your question, Councilmember Ford, I think part of the consideration would be, if such a proposal were to be made, I would opine that that would be a substantial change, and then therefore your recommended change would have to go back to the planning department
And
for
commission.
This matter didn't, well, it was a,
Subdivision, it doesn't require the commission.
correct.
Okay,
But
right.
it
Sorry
was
about that.
subject to the 2006 SMA major permit, and that condition was was made a part of that permit, and an SMA major is issued by the planning commission. So I think I'd have to kind of think this through, and if I would have to read the language, the specific language of the SMA major, and if they required a 3-car parking or the Makai Trail as part of that permit, then any change, substantial change to that condition would then have to go back to the planning commission.
All right.
But if it was just a request for public access, I'm not sure if that would satisfy it.
All right. Well, I
Hope that.
have great problems with that. Okay, then the next thing is that all these negotiations, and I want to commend Ms. Willie for all the work and effort she's made to get this language. I'm kind of distressed that it's disappeared somehow. Also, I have no document from Park Services. It has not been distributed to the rest of us to know what that negotiation is about. It might relieve my anxiety about the trail that we're not supposed to talk about. But because I haven't seen it, I don't know. And certainly the public has not been privy to it, and they're in an uproar. And they've continued to be in this uproar all of these months because they feel that they're being left out on something that we're not allowed to talk about. So, I would like to see this thing postponed, but I'm not going to make that suggestion. I mean, I'm not going to make a motion at this time, and it may not even survive for me to be able to make a motion. But let me tell you, you can just call me a very wary person. But when something's being negotiated and it's not in front of us to vote as part of the package, I am very uncomfortable because I'm one of the people who's been here on the Oceanside 1250, also known as Kohala debacle that has gone on for 20 years. And we've been in court, we've had lawsuits, it's now in bankruptcy. There is no guarantee that if we pass this today without postponing it and waiting for the Park Service agreement to be dealt with, whatever that is, that these lots won't be immediately sold, and the new property owner, because there's nothing restricting them right now, won't do something disastrous to that trail. There's no control over it. And that's what the public is concerned about, and that's what I'm concerned about. So I think we should talk about a postponement, and I'm about ready to do it. I'm gonna, yes,
May I interrupt?
yes, you may.
Just to clarify the record, just so that there's no misconceptions or misunderstandings, as it relates to the good faith agreement, that is an agreement between the developers and the National Park Service. The County of Hawaii is not a party to that agreement. That agreement has not been presented to the planning director for review or comment, and we have not played any role in the terms and conditions of that agreement. Like I said, I was just provided with a copy of that agreement
Yes.
this morning, prior
I
to
understand.
coming to today. So just to be clear that the County of Hawaii is not engaging in any secretive dealings or anything to that effect. Again, that's an agreement that flowed from the following meeting, and that's all I know about it.
Thank you. And that's all I know about it. And it's all this council knows about it, and you have made my point. We don't know anything about this agreement that might alleviate the concerns that some of us have that believe these things are linked even though we're not allowed to talk about it.
Okay, your time's up, your time's up. We're gonna come back to you, Brenda. Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Poindexter.
We'll see.
I,
Point of order,
yeah,
Oh, that's right, Mr. Ligon didn't go, that's right, my apologies. We're still in the first round, Mr. Ligon, go ahead.
thank you, Mr. Chair. For the previous comment, I did know about the good faith agreement. And, wow, talk about you definitely got some skill on making things more intense than previously was. I have a couple questions that I kind of want to get answered. If we could have the Director Kanua. Thank you.
Bill, would you not go too far?
Please state your name and position.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the council. My name is Dwayne Kunu, I'm Planning Director.
Thank you. I just heard that some comments of unsafe, and I heard of parking. Could you please explain to me what the requirements are for parking regarding trails of this caliber?
I was just gonna present council with some further information regarding the parking situation. This project, the second part of this project, received a special management area major use permit, which is issued by the County Planning Commission in May of 2006. And that was subject to a number of conditions. More specifically, condition 15 states that the applicant shall provide a minimum of 3 public parking spaces in close proximity to the Malka end of the Malka-Makai pedestrian trail. So sometimes the conditions for providing public access relates to some kind of a public access plan and the number of stalls, the width of the easements, where they connect to a part of that plan. In this specific application, it was a specific condition, a minimum of 3 stalls.
Now, for me to really comprehend it, could you give me an example in Hawaii County where there is a public access that has the same requirement as this?
I don't know of any standard guideline criteria that has a proportionate relationship to the number of stalls per access. There have been studies in the past, which have proposed some kind of relationship to that. But as far as anything being formalized, I'm not aware of anything. So it's probably on a case-by-case basis.
So on this
I really
case,
can't tell on this one.
and if there is something that you might recall later on, please let me know. But on this case, the minimum of 3 public parking stalls, would you call that unsafe or would you call that safe?
Well, the condition just spells out what the minimum is. It doesn't say where it is or how it's being provided.
Councilman Gilligan, may I interject here? Again, Bill Burhunty. I think when the question you posed, I'm not sure if that would be a proper question. I think the proper question would be as to whether or not the proposed location of the parking stalls are adequate or inadequate to satisfy the condition of the SMA permit, major permit that was issued in 2006. And part of that consideration regarding the adequacy is whether or not there is some component regarding safety and the like. But like the condition said, the location of the 3 parking stalls were not clearly identified in the condition. So when the former planning director was in receipt and went out and did a site inspection, I'm sure part of the vetting process that was that took place at that time was regarding the safety issue and the like of the public access inclusive of the parking lots. So I think to pose that question to the current director, I'm not sure he
Well,
would
let me
have.
make this statement. I do want to say that the client did feel their obligation with the requirement here. Now, depending on the placement of those 3 stalls, is there any guideline regarding how placement of stalls should be? Is that, for example, if they were to set it in a certain area, do they have to meet a requirement to put those stalls there?
Excuse me.
In most cases, the stalls have to be provided on-site, for one thing. But I'm aware of other cases
Sorry,
where
Director, is this on site?
this is on-site.
Okay, so that requirement is met. You
Yeah,
would-
I've known other cases where the stalls have been provided off-site, but there is an associated agreement which ties the use of those stalls to the purpose for which they were
Well,
provided.
You just cleared it up for me. The fact that these stalls are on site, I don't think there's a safety concern for these stalls. I have a question, Mr. Chair, to Councilmember Willie.
Go ahead.
Councilmember Willie, this is in your district, and you have more weight than I do regarding this issue. And I know you have spoken to the concerned members in the community about this. What is their main concern?
Well, there's a procedural concern and there's substantive concerns. On the process concern, it's having been left out of the loop of the ability to review things in where it was a timely manner, such as, for example, the
Okay, hold on. So you said they were left out the loop. Right now, they're in the loop.
They're in the loop, but they're not in the loop of let's just say right now, is what's happening over the past 24 hours. I thought we had
Okay, so let's clear it up.
That.
Okay, so as a council member, as their representative right now, you have been in contact with them and pretty much letting them know what's going on and being in that loop. So what's their?
And I don't think that this easement that's being negotiated is part of what we should be dealing with. I think when we met last time, there were certain conditions that I felt we were moving it forward to council. And those
Certain
identify the
conditions.
site, identify it, and despite what my constituents' remaining concerns, I was willing to proceed and allow them to go on. But they're no longer agreeing to what was agreed to at the last council meeting.
Could you refresh my memory in exactly what these conditions you're referring to?
Yes, what it was that we proceed with the access easement, that it was to be 20, additional 20 feet. I may be forgetting something, but the basic key things. And that they provide language so we would be to prevent blockage of the Alaloa Trail, so that could go on and be addressed in the
Okay,
future.
so
And that
the
language,
blockage has been addressed.
no, it has not. They're removing that.
Well, you're not, as you have mentioned earlier, these are 2 separate issues.
I'm saying we agreed, they're not. We allowed that to go on for another day, and they agreed that they would identify the trail, put it on, and have this language. And I thought we were set after the committee meeting and would go on to council
Okay, so
on
one
those
last question.
terms. And so it's
Councilmember
really,
Willie.
now they want to sort of move things into this other easement
Councilmember
deal.
Okay,
Point of
hold
order.
on. Okay, hold on. Okay. So Mr. Lagat, go ahead.
Your focus on the Alaloa Trail, what is it about that trail that the community wants? What's the interest in that trail specifically that?
Well, Mr. Lagat, let's not talk.
Okay, so I guess what everybody's kind of feeling is that it's separate issues.
but not blocking it so that it could be left for another day.
The fact that you're mentioning it right now, it's, so let's get back to the main easement that we're trying to grant. What's your concern about that? What's the
What are
people's
my
concern?
concerns? So like on the parking, it wasn't just the number of spaces, it was to be in close proximity to the trailhead. It isn't in close proximity to the trailhead. I didn't fight on that, okay? There were who's gonna maintain it, issues about the treacherousness, that kids, it's not really good. I was letting all that go in terms of balancing, at least let's pin down that no one could build on the Alaloa Trail and leave that for another day. And so it's really the developer that's
Okay,
bringing in
Okay,
this.
so I think she's answered your
Yeah,
question.
she
Ms. Siliga,
answered my
go ahead.
question, and from what I heard, this easement that we're coming before the council, sounds like it's good.
But it's not,
Okay. Hold on, okay, so you have the floor, go ahead, finish your
And
comments.
when you're talking about the Alaloa Trail, that's something that's separate. And as I'm hearing from the other council members, that's where we're feeling. And the fact that we're accepting this, it's two separate issues. And I know that's been repeated over and over. And I just want to say there's a good faith agreement with the developer. They're talking about what we can't discuss on a separate issue. And they are doing that, they are being proactive on that end. We're here to discuss about this grant of easement. And I'm glad that we're trying to take care of the safety issues, and also, it also addresses who maintained it. I was just reading that part. I don't want to go on and on, so I'm just going to say thank you for answering my questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Siliga. So Ms. Poindexter was next. Go ahead,
Okay.
second on.
So, as our council stated, that we're here to address condition 14 that is before us, which is a separate issue again, like I've stated earlier, than discussing the Alaloa, which I don't want to get into also. However, I know that a few of our council members were still concerned about that good faith agreement. So I'd like to ask if Mr. Anderson and Mr. Hinton come up again, please. And before I ask a question, I'd just like to say that I know that the agreement, like Margaret, the question Councilmember Iligan had asked Councilmember Willie about what was stated in what should be in an agreement, and I agree that the Alaloa should not be mentioned at all because it is a separate issue that I would love to deal with in the very near future. So I'm hoping that some legislation will come before this council regarding that, so we can help the people of that area and the Native Hawaiian people and their rights to that. So at this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Anderson, do you have the good faith agreement with you?
Yes, we sent a copy to Councilwoman Margaret Willie yesterday, last night, and I had assumed it was going to be forwarded to all the council
Okay.
members so
So-
that they could see
okay.
it, but
So
I
at this
apologize for that.
time, I'd like to ask our council chair, is it possible, just because, I'm not agreeing that this should be part of our discussion, not at all.
Point of order.
Yes.
My child walked down that highway, and of course, we can only have 3 people. Everybody else has got to park on the shoulder of the highway and get out of their cars with their children and whatever, and then take the trailhead and get down to the shoreline. Excuse me. I think this is a very poorly designed situation, and while it was legal in the SMA, I don't think that the planning department or the planning director should have ever allowed this to go through. I think that we've got a public highway along the shoreline that's just being, it's a joke to have to do a grant of easement to gain a public highway that the state and or the county already own. So I'm having an issue with that. But here's what I think we should be doing. I think there's a whole community of people in North Kohala and in South Kohala that deserve to know what negotiations are going on and this potential contract between the National Park Service and the developer contains. It might put a lot of them at ease. And I'm not discussing any particular thing we're not supposed to discuss. So I'm going to move that we postpone this meeting until April 16th, 2014, just so everybody knows it's not some other year, and allow the National Park Service to do their thing and get it to the council members, get it to the public, and then I'll be willing to look at this again. But as this stands today, I'm not going to vote for something I think is going to jeopardize the health and safety of the public, or in some way not take care of the issue that we all know is here. It's the 800-pound gorilla sitting in this room, and it's not being dealt with. So I have a motion on the floor to postpone until April 16th. I need a second.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Kanuha. So Mrs. Ford, did you need to add anything further than what you just said about the postponement?
No, sir, I think I've covered that.
Okay, any discussion on the postponement? Ms. Poindexter?
Yeah, I'm not gonna agree on the postponement until, I wanna hear from Councilmember Eoff and Councilmember Willie again, so I'm not agreeing to postpone this until I get to hear from them again on this council. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on the postponement? Mr. Iligan?
I feel the same way as Councilmember Poindexter.
Okay, Ms. Willie, did you want to comment on the postponement?
May I make a point of order?
Yes.
As I walked back to my council chair, I heard at least one and possibly two council members talking about calling for the question. So if we don't discuss this now and take a vote on this now, or I withdraw my, my motion to postpone, then one of those council members may call for the question and stop the discussion. I don't feel I can trust my fellow council members. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Kanuha and Ms. Eoff, any discussion on the motion to postpone?
Well, I'm leaning towards supporting the postponement. I did have some questions for Ms. Willie and also for Mr. Dwayne Kanuha, but
Well, Ms. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Eoff, you know, you did have questions, and we did recognize that you were going to be next in line to speak, so, but right now, the motion is to postpone, so it's up to you as far as, unless the maker's going to withdraw the motion.
right.
Which is
Well,
not happening, so, I'm sorry, go ahead,
I'm
Ms. Eoff.
okay. I'm okay if we would just, if we're concerned that there's going to be a call for the question and we want to vote on a postponement. I'm going to vote to postpone because I have some lingering questions. But even if my questions were addressed, I think it would require a postponement in the end result anyway. So.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Eoff. Ms. Willie?
Yeah, I was thinking of calling the question, but I won't do that, Brenda, with your motion, just so you know. But I would like to, I don't think I can ask the question or say what I want and weave it into the postponement, but I would like to have the opportunity to ask another couple questions before we decide whether to postpone. So even though I would like to postpone, I'm leaning against it because I feel there's still more discussion from Ms. Eoff. I don't feel has had a full time to ask her questions, and I have more. So in a roundabout way, I would like for there to be further discussion before we postpone or call the question or whatever.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Willie. Mr. Kuno, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I you know my position on, I think there needs to be a postponement. I don't know if it's going to pass at this time, Ms. Ford, but because of the other questions and concerns still with the other with a few council members, but I think there's enough question, you know, in my sense that maybe this needs to go back to the committee level. I don't know. I just to myself there's some concerns, but I'll leave it at that. I'm for the postponement. Whatever happens, happens. But you have my position.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gunnar. Mr. Lagan, on the postponement.
On this postponement, if this postponement doesn't go through, it goes to Councilmember Eoff. It's the chair who's gonna be recognizing. Nobody can call a question unless they're recognized. So unless the chair recognize Margaret Willie, then she won't be able to call for the question. We're on this topic right now. Let's just ask the questions that we've been desiring to ask and get the answers out there publicly. So I'm not supporting this postponement so we can get this going.
Thank you, Mr. Lagan. So yeah, that was the plan as we had talked about earlier. So, Ms. Ford, did you want to?
If every person over here, Hilo seems to be the problem, will promise not to call for the question, I'll withdraw my motion to postpone and continue the discussion, which I think is necessary to do. But I'm not gonna let somebody call for the question, and railroad all these people up in Kohala, railroad the National Park Service. Thank you.
Well, I don't know that we can get that assurance, Ms. Ford. We are on the second round, just so we know, and you know, if the subject matter needs further discussion, it does. It's as simple as that, right? Whether it doesn't or I can't prevent any council member from the right of you know, making a motion. I can't control that. So anyway, so given that, then we should okay. So since there's no withdrawal of the motion, we are on the motion to postpone. Why don't we just vote on that, then we can see where we go forward. But if the motion does fail, I will call on Ms. Yoff because she is next in line. Okay, Mr. Clerk, roll call, please.
Ms. Yoff,
Aye.
Ms. Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Lagan,
No.
Mr. Kanuha,
Aye.
Mr. Kern,
No.
Ms. Poindexter,
No?
Ms. Willie,
No.
Chair Shimono.
No.
Chair Shimono, you have 3 ayes, 5 noes,
Okay.
and 1 excuse.
Motion fails. Okay, Ms. Yoff, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for the planning director.
Okay, he's on his way up.
Okay.
Dwayne Kanoa,
Oh.
Planning Director.
Thank you. Okay, so we're looking at Resolution 140, Draft 3. And I really couldn't see any difference between the language in Draft 2 to Draft 3. It kind of looks like the attached map is slightly different, but I can't really tell what the differences are. I looked really carefully. There's no difference in language between Draft 2 and Draft 3. The difference between the Draft 1 and then 2 and 3, which I kind of got after the Finance Committee meeting, is something that I think Ms. Willie asked to have put in, which was, and that's the language of number 4, that our acceptance is without prejudice. We discussed that in Finance, but then we saw it in the Draft 2. But then Draft 3 came out, and I really don't understand what Draft 3 is doing. Different than Draft 2.
I believe Draft 3 expanded the easement area from 10 to 20 feet, and there's
And that's what the
something
map
else
change
related to the archaeological sites, but that's the way I understood it.
So it's not in the language of Draft 3, it's just in this map? The change?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Okay, and the other question is, Ms. Willie read some language that I guess she had been going over with the applicant. And the language was very good, but if that can be in any way incorporated into the grant of easement, I believe that would be a lot more secure than just saying, oh, well, they're going to put that in CC&Rs. And CC&Rs are something that the county doesn't really have any legal jurisdiction over. And I don't know how binding it is. I mean, you've heard it, and you've stated that you wouldn't approve a final subdivision approval without some indication of agreement to that language. But my next question was going to be for Ms. Willie. If she had, I didn't know if she intended to amend this grant of easement also, or if her language was only supposed to be agreed upon for CC&Rs.
Ms. Yoff, are you asking
Or if
Ms.
you
Wu
under-
question?
Well, I don't know if Mr. Kanuha understood that. I couldn't get clear on that when she stated it. I mean, none of it seemed like she was disappointed, and because the discussion in Finance Committee was that we were going to agree to the grant of easement, pass it through, knowing that some additional language was going to come forward today. And I didn't know if she intended that additional language to be part of the grant of easement, and I don't see any changes to it to indicate that, or if her expected language was just in some kind of an agreement for a CC&R.
I think the way I remember the discussion at the Finance Committee, and it's actually the discussion that's been on the floor for this grant of easement all the way through, and that is what's before the council now, and it's the grant of easement. And my recollection at the Finance Committee, during the Finance Committee discussion, when Councilperson Willie had suggested that the applicant consider language via CC&Rs that would identify the Alaloa, you know, already that discussion started going against, you know, where the whole issue was, and just to stick on the easement as one and the Alaloa as a separate issue. And when the applicants agreed to do something with that language, in my mind, you know, it brought it back together again. You know, how we've been trying to keep it separate. So I can understand why even though they agreed to take a look at that language, I can understand why it's not in the grant of easement language. Okay. That's, you know, again, it's just to keep it separate. For me, again, we had we weren't a party to this good faith agreement, whatever it is. I just got a copy of it, and I haven't really had a chance to look at it. But for me, what I've seen of it, the language in the grant of easement, condition number 4, provides, in my opinion, a good segue to what some of the components I see in here have, without combining both issues together. That's just the way I see it going through now. There's also a couple of components in this good faith agreement which recognize that that some of the components related to the covenants, some designation of the trail, will be, the applicants have acknowledged that they recognize that those components will be a condition of their final subdivision approval. Either condition of the approval, indicated on the maps, something else. So, you know, it's gone a step further, really, than it had to. But I think, in my opinion, they're trying to show that there's some good faith agreement to link the two, but still keep them separate, you know, for the purposes of what the council needs to consider at this point in time.
and I understand that, but I don't see where the county has any fallback, really, unless we did some amendment to either the reso of 140 or the map, possibly showing an alignment of the Alaloa. I mean, I can't read the map, so I don't think the Alaloa is depicted on Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2 at the end of the GOE. It seems like we need something that the county can legally bind. I love the negotiations towards a good faith agreement. I love, and I think the perfect solution for this, not only the public access, but the Alaloa, the historical nature and the intent to connect as much of the Alaka'akai and Alaloa as possible through that area. That is really good, and I'm still very grateful for that having become a big leap forward. But I feel like something needs to be amended in this grant of easement. I don't know what. I know not everything can be put in here and shouldn't be, but something, or else it's an amendment to the SMA permit that requires that as those things to be part of the final subdivision approval. I don't know whether we want to open up, all of that. So I was thinking Ms. Willie was going to introduce some language to this GOE or some type of a depiction of the Alaloa on this map as maybe just a assurance that as we move forward, there's some fallback for the county to be involved in carrying out all of this agreements. Because right now it seems like the National Park Service and the applicant or the developer has some kind of an agreement between them, but I don't really see where the county is part of that. And I haven't seen it at all, so maybe I'm missing out on that. And then I guess if I'm not out of time, that was going to be my question to Ms. Willie, was she planning to introduce an amendment today? And if so, it probably would have caused us to postpone action on the reso because it's in its final reading, so unless we suspend our rules. But I don't know if she had any amendment. I haven't seen anything.
So Missy, if I was planning to call Miss Willie after you, so are you asking Miss Willie a question now? I mean, she can respond to you.
I guess so, unless, I'm sorry, I didn't finish with Dwayne, unless I think he did explain it to me and all of us, his take on it. But yeah, Miss Willie?
Yes.
Could I ask you that question?
Yes, thank you.
I mean, if the process hadn't changed overnight, as you said, you were on a different track, and I didn't know if you were intending to amend this reso and grant of easement or today or not.
There got to be a time crunch. Charlie and Steve Lim did get me the language, but that was just it's really just in the past few days that I had the language and we negotiated. And so I think it was the day before yesterday that we confirmed that language that we were both okay on. And I had asked that be also shown on a plan. So, and I asked them when they came here, how do we, whether putting it into a deed restriction or some way that we know this is fixed. I don't trust the planning department to ensure that this is done. I mean, even right now, when the director's saying that they agreed to take a look at it, they didn't agree to take a look at it, they agreed to do it. So I have trust. If I was going to, the easement agreement with the federal easement agreement, we would not be a part of. It's only a preliminary draft, and I feel we need something right now. I think that my understanding is that I'm willing to trust where if Charlie and Steve say we're going to put a deed restriction in with this language, it's on the record, the director hears it, the Bill Briante won't forget it and has it, and it's done. I can trust. I feel I can trust that assurance where it's really explicit here, and it is in a deed, and it would be on a plan, and that's where I'm going. And that was our agreement. Again, I feel their negotiations is a draft. We're not party to it. I don't feel that that's going to be sufficient for me. So,
Okay.
if that answers your question.
Okay, so in other words, you weren't really going to make any amendments to.
I didn't have time,
satisfied
and,
with-
no, I didn't have time to do it between working it through as of yesterday and getting back and how we would firm that up. I was going to be okay with a verbal assurance, but all of a sudden I heard about this new overriding umbrella easement and it got lost, okay? Suddenly this new negotiation came and it looked to me like what I was asking for was not going to happen, and instead they were going to be discussing it in their future negotiations. And I just said that I have a problem too. I also went to the movies last night and didn't spend time negotiating through the evening.
Did you sleep?
Okay. So I guess I'm a little bit unsure what to do here. I feel like we've made progress. I think this is all really great. I don't know whether the community is totally on board, because I don't probably understand everything that's being discussed, since we haven't even been able to see language or good faith agreement in writing yet. I would assume that, I guess I'm not sure how long we would have to postpone it to. April 16th is maybe longer than we need. If we were to just ask for a shorter postponement, would the applicant be willing to help put a community meeting together and maybe include some of the parties that have testified today that still aren't quite satisfied? That do you think that would help? It would help me to know that there was support for this. I mean, I feel supportive, but I haven't heard from the community. And
Ms. Yaf, sorry to interrupt. Your time is up. So you're asking a question to, I mean, I guess logically
I was
would...
going to try and ask the applicant, because I know April 16th is a long time to postpone it, and I know we're not trying to be obstructionist here. I want to move forward. I like these agreements.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that the community can support it, and would a shorter postponement be something that the applicant would agree to?
Okay.
Let me make a couple of statements first, and then I'll respond to the timeline. On behalf of Kohala LLC, Kohala Kai LLC, I've been authorized to agree to record a deed covenant against all the lots that ever get subdivided in the Kohala Kai subdivision that recognize the Jeep Trail or the Alaloa alignment and impose at least a 10-foot buffer away from the trail for structures and other implements. That condition is included in the good faith agreement with the National Park Service. The other aspect I want to mention is that any additional requirement to add mention of the Alaloa Trail and the preservation and things like that into the grant of public access easement that you're looking at today is directly contrary to our legal interests, and as I said before, we would not agree to that addition. So we think that the resolution number 140-13 is good to go as it stands today. And like I said, it's kind of ironic that our good faith efforts to start to work with the National Park Service to address the community issues are now coming to bite us in the butt and delay the matter that we've been pushing for the last 9 months.
Okay. So Ms. Diab, you still, that was in response to your question. I'm going to move on to Ms. Willie. Ms. Willie was next in line. Council members, we already went through 2 full rounds. Ms. Willie, as a representative of this district, I'm granting her a 3rd opportunity, but unless we're doing something else, I'm going to stick to, unless we want further discussion. So Ms. Willie, why don't you? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Kohala. Sorry.
Thank you, Councilman Yoshimoto. Just to add to what the applicant had just represented, in my quick review of what they're proposing here, I don't believe it's even executed between both parties, but it's pretty clear that there's a recognition that this other component of a conservation easement with the National Park Service is gonna take a while to work its way through. But from what I see on this draft good faith agreement, the implementation of it, the execution of it, based on what he represented, is not tied to that other component going through. You know, it's something that they've agreed to do. We haven't agreed to anything, but they've, through this draft, placed us in a position of being able to enforce that through the final approval for this subdivision that they have to do. So I just wanted to ensure you that it's not related to any ongoing negotiations between a national park. If it all falls apart, something will be recorded related to what Councilwoman Willie wanted. If it all goes well, then the national park would essentially control an easement from 10 feet above of where the Jeep Road currently runs all the way down to the shoreline. If that doesn't work, then there will be two public accesses in place. The one that you're considering today and the one that they've agreed to place on the map as a condition of final approval or on the final map before they get final subdivision for the increment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cano. Ms. Willie,
Thank you very much.
I need to really eat something, so I'm gonna faint soon, so Ms. Willie, if you can wrap it up.
Okay, Charlie, if you could come up quickly because everybody's hungry. Okay, are you agreeable to put in the language, and I will pass it out, that I read earlier into a deed covenant that would apply right now, regardless of what happens with your future negotiations with the federal government?
Yes, that's what
Okay,
Steve
and
said just
will you-
earlier, that Kohala Kai will be willing to protect the Jeep Road all along the trail and put it in a deed restriction, that nothing can be built on it, that it
What
can't
we
be
have
logged,
right here.
everything that was said there, yes.
And that you will identify this on the plan with the historic site number on your subdivision plan?
Correct.
Yes. And that you will do this now, prior to selling any of these lots?
Prior to selling
So that
any
it
lots.
doesn't get held up in whatever time frame of future negotiations. And just for the public, I just want to say, this just prevents something being done on this land so that it would not come into conflict with whatever is in the future negotiated with the Park Service.
Yeah, both of those actions would protect
Okay, and
the trail.
okay, and Bill Briante, attorney, can I get you to come forward and quickly, Director Kanuha? I just want it on the record because I'm doing this orally and not requesting something in writing in trust. Do you understand that they, and will stand up and support that they will, in fact, carry this out, and that you've heard this and this is agreed to here? And same thing, Director, that they're not just looking at it.
Actually, the exact language you're talking about is what's in this.
It is, but we're not going to wait for that.
That's correct.
They might fail, hopefully they succeed, but I don't want to depend on that. We're not a party to that, okay? And I will, if I can, get the clerk just to hand this down there so that they've actually seen what I'm talking about and that it's not just some paper. And I do think we're not talking about a developer that lives in Taiwan or Timbuktu. They're here, they're part of the community. Steve might go off to Honolulu some, but anyway, part of the big island, Ohana, and I do trust to be able to do this orally as long as it's really clear to my guys that are the ones that need to stand up for the county. and I think it says CCNRs, but what we're agreeing to here, so that we don't have to discuss how their CCNRs are written, that it would be a deed covenant. Okay,
The
and,
covenant.
and can I just say that the director just turned to Charlie and Steve and said, are you agreeable to this? And they both nodded their heads. And let me just say, therefore, and then the director nodded his head, and I just want this all down because it's not in writing. You know, we're trying to balance all of this and get it very clear for my constituents that I did agree that if they did this, I would support it, regardless of how abysmal there were some other things that happened along the way. Okay, I'm done.
You're done? Okay, so that was, everyone had 2 rounds and you had a third opportunity, Ms. Willie.
Well, we're going to, he's gonna go.
Any, council rules say two times, so, actually, Ms. Poindexter was the introducer. You have anything else? Because you have a,
No, so are you gonna call for the vote?
yes, okay. Anything else? Well, Mr. Kunua really didn't have a second round. Mr. Kunua, real quick, anything else?
You know, I'm still going to always have the reservations. I think Ms. Willie did work with the community. I would hope she did, and I'm ready to vote.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clerk?
Ms. Eoff,
Aye.
Ms. Ford,
Honolulu, no.
Mr. Ligon,
Aye.
Mr. Kanuha,
Kanalua, yes.
Mr. Kern.
Aye.
Ms. Poindexter,
Aye?
Ms. Willie,
Aye.
Chair Yoshimoto.
Aye.
Chair Yoshimoto, you have 7 ayes, 1 no.
One excuse.
One excuse.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Okay, so resolution 140-13, draft 3 is approved. Okay, Mr. Kuno, you wanted to take 281-14, is that correct, before the lunch?